Hi everybody, welcome to Blue Liner Milsurps. My name is Scott, and this is the channel all about beautiful military surplus firearms. This week is going to be video number 2 of our series on protectors of neutrality and the Swiss rifles. In our video number 1, we talked about the Vetterli rifles. Those went basically from 1869 to 1889, 20 years that the Swiss used the Vetterli rifle. Then in 1889, they adopted this rifle known as the Schmidt Rubin Model 1889. Now, this was the first rifle in a whole series of rifles called the Schmidt Rubin, and there's some very specific characteristics about this rifle that we're going to go over that makes them a Schmidt Rubin. Now, these Schmidt Rubin series were used basically from 1889 to 1958. And this one, the 1889, was the first rifle of the Schmidt Rubin series. The main characteristic of this rifle is the action, and it is a straight pull action. Now, for most bolt-action rifles, like the Swiss Vetterli, it took 4 actions. You lifted the bolt, you pulled the bolt back, you pushed the bolt back in, and then you locked the bolt down. That's 4 actions. This rifle took 4 actions and took them down to 2 because it's just a straight pull. So let me demonstrate for you what a straight pull rifle is. There is a bolt here, and here is the handle on this side. And a little later on in the video, we'll have a better view when I turn this around. But basically, the soldier pulls the bolt back and then forward. And that's it. Now it's cocked, and it's got a round in there. Of course, there's no round in there now. I don't have anything loaded. But it's a straight pull. You pull the bolt back, you push it forward, only 2 actions to get it loaded and ready to go. So that is the essence of the Schmidt Rubin rifle series, the straight pull. So this was designed to take the place of the Vetterli rifle. So let's talk about Schmidt and Rubin and why they are named as the makers and designers of this rifle and its ammunition. The first one is Lieutenant Colonel Rudolf Schmidt. He's the one who designed the straight pull action that I just showed you. Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Smith was in the Swiss Army, assigned to the main Swiss armor at Bern, and he is the one who developed that straight pull system. I'll put a picture of Lieutenant Colonel Rudolf Schmidt right there for you. And his name is on the rifle series. The next one is Lieutenant Colonel Edward Rubin. I'll put a picture of Lieutenant Colonel Rubin there. Now, Colonel Rubin designed what would become the ammunition for this rifle. Lieutenant Colonel Rubin designed the copper-jacketed cartridge. Now, up until this point, most, if not all, bullets and projectiles were pure lead, soft lead that would conform in the barrel and would shoot out. He was the one who came up with the idea of jacketing that lead round with what would be copper and later a copper nickel alloy. And he was the one who designed the initial ammunition for this. And it would become a 7.5 by 53.5 millimeter copper jacketed cartridge. And that would eventually become what's known as the GP90 ammunition. Now, GP does not stand for general purpose. They speak German in Switzerland, and that actually stands for Gewehr Patron Model 1890. Gewehr Patron is German for rifle cartridge. So when the Colonel Schmidt was initially designing this rifle, it was being designed for black powder. They wanted another black powder cartridge rifle. And that's what this was actually developed for, another black powder cartridge. But once again, as a story that we've seen many times on this and other channels, the French stepped in 1886 and introduced the Lebel with smokeless powder, which changed everything and set off the huge arms race, small arms race in Europe, and the Swiss were no different. The Swiss were in the middle of developing this as a black powder cartridge. Lieutenant Edward Rubin was able to make the change, and it became a smokeless powder rifle, and that is the GP90. The GP90 ammo is the only ammo that you can use in this rifle. And the reason for that has to do with the strength of the action and the strength of the round. So what I'm going to do is take this bolt out, and I'm going to show you why we don't use modern ammunition in this, and the design that made this initially for black powder. So in order to take the bolt out, you just push it back. There's a little button here on the side, and later on when we go over the characteristics of this rifle, I will show that to you. But this is the bolt, and it is massive. It is 9.3 inches. And this bolt is absolutely huge. What makes this bolt really interesting, and what does it as a straight pull, is the fact that we have an operating rod here, but we have a camming action on this bolt collar. This is the bolt collar here, and you can see the camming action that's cut into that. So when we go forward, the bolt collar here is what rotates rather than the bolt. But the thing that makes this originally for black powder is the fact that they put the locking lugs here at this end, at the bottom end of the bolt. Normally, you would put your locking lugs at the top of a bolt because that's where it would be the strongest. But when this was being developed for black powder, Colonel Schmidt put them back down here at the bottom. And there's a reason for that. If this was going to be a black powder cartridge rifle, black powder has fouling in it. Fouling is basically the carbon and the unexploded parts of the black powder that get put in the receiver. They kind of gum up the bottom of your barrel here. So if you were going to have a straight pull system, you want your locking lugs at the back so they don't get caught up in that fouling. So that's why he put them down here. The problem is that once they decided to use smokeless powder here, this made the bolt and the action not as strong as it could have been. We will see in later models that they will take these locking lugs and move them up when they decided to use different ammunition starting around 1911. So they would make a change. But until then, the locking lugs are in the back, and the action can only take somewhere about 37,000 psi, which is what that GP90, which used that early form of smokeless powder, called cordite, it was able to handle. So when they switched from the black powder over to the smokeless powder, they did test. They said, this cordite, we can leave the blocking lugs in the back because this will handle it. Later on in the 1900s, when they went to a much more powerful smokeless powder, this would not work. So if you were ever to get yourself one of these rifles and you get yourself a GP11, which came out in 1911, or one of the modern commercial 7.5 Swiss rounds made by PPU or Seller and Bloy, do not shoot them in this. This has rear locking lugs, and the pressure in there will not take it. And you could hurt your rifle and ultimately yourself as well. So I'll put a picture of what the GP90 ammunition looks like right up here. I was able to find some GP90. They do not sell it commercially. You would have to reload it if you want it, but I did find a picture of it online. I'll put that up there. So you want to use only GP90, which is a much lower pressured smokeless powder that this rifle with the rear locking lugs can handle. So what I'm going to do now is stop the video, and I'm going to show you all the neat features on this, but I want to turn the camera around and go through and show it from front to back, all the different features that make this a very unique rifle when it came out in 1889. So hang with me for a minute while I stop the video and I reconfigure the gun and the camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we're back, and I'm just going to take you from the front to the rear of this rifle and show you its characteristics. This will take not too long, but it's a really long rifle. So we're going to start up here at the front, and this is just a muzzle cover to protect the muzzle. They were issued to every soldier as just a cover for the muzzle. We'll set that aside for now. The front sight is just a simple blade sight. They do have a stacking swivel. It is kind of bent here, and that's by design. The Swiss felt that it would catch on things like brush as they were going through areas that were heavily forested or something like that. That's the reason for that it would not get caught on stuff. I don't know if that actually helped or not, but that was their thinking. Bayonet lug here on the bottom. Front barrel band, we're going to come back along this very long rifle. It is 51.3 inches long. The barrel itself is 30.7 inches. The receiver and the bolt 9.3 inches long. It does have a free-floating barrel. There is, if you see in here, a little brass piece here on the end to help keep it free-floated. It's kind of semi-free-floated. So as we come back here, let me show you the rear sight. The rear sight is in meters, and it goes from 400 to 2,000. So the way the rear sight works is you simply squeeze. So you can see there's on this side, it's spring-loaded, and the soldier would set the meters that they were going to shoot, and then that's where the sight was, and they could adjust it from 400 all the way up to 2,000. So that's the rear sight. Come along here. This is a 12-round magazine. Remember, they were able to put 12 rounds in the Vetterli. They wanted to keep 12 rounds, so they had a 12-round magazine. Now, this is kind of semi-detachable. You can take it out, but you have to take the screw out and finagle with this lever. I'm going to show you what this lever is for if you wanted to take it out. Typically, this was meant to be loaded through stripper clips on the top. So the reason for this is your magazine cutoff. So what the soldiers would do is if they wanted to cut off the magazine so you could single load into the receiver, you would move this lever up. So I want you to watch what happens to the magazine when I move the lever up. It moves down. It moves the magazine down, and thus the magazine is no longer in the path of the bolt if we were to put the bolt forward here. So it can't do that because it's too far down. And then you could just single load rounds in there if you wanted to, and when you want to go back to the magazine, you just take the lever and you go, and it moves it back up. And now the rounds from the magazine are back in the path of the bolt, so you can see there. So simple two-stage trigger here. Here is the bolt release that I was telling you about. So if you want to take the bolt out, you just push that down and pull the bolt out. It's very simple. I'm only have one hand available right now while I'm holding the camera, so I'm not going to show you. But I will show you later on how we get that bolt in and out using that lever. And then a very simple buttstock with a curved butt plate. So those are the characteristics of the rifle. The model 1889, which was the first straight pull of the Schmidt Rubin series. So now I'm going to stop the video again and put the camera back where it was before, and I'm going to show you how we do the bolt. We're going to take the bolt apart, we're going to put it back together and show you the bolt disassembly and assembly, and then we'll show you putting it back in and out of the rifle. And then that's going to be our series, video number 2 on the Swiss rifles. And so hang with me for a moment while I redo the camera, and we'll talk more about this massive 9.3 inch bolt and exactly how it works. All right, welcome back. We are going to continue here talking about the model 1889 of the Swiss Schmidt Rubin series, and we're going to talk about the bolt on this rifle. So to take the bolt out, there is a simple lever here on the side. You just take your bolt all the way to the back, pull down, and the bolt comes out. So we're going to get this out of the way for a second while we talk about this bolt and its function. Now, the thing about this bolt and its very simplicity with its locking lugs to the rear and how it's long is that you have a firing pin that goes from all the way. This is actually the end of the firing pin here. I know it looks like a big syringe, doesn't it? But this is actually the end of the firing pin back here. And the way that this is also the safety. So we see where the sear is right here in this long, what would be in this long channel. It's in the cock position. This is a cock on opening type of bolt. So if the soldier wanted to put it on safety, they would just take this big end of the syringe and this big loop here on the end, pull it out, and put it horizontal. And when it was horizontal, now it's in safe. And if they wanted to put it back into the firing position, pull it out, rotate it back to the vertical position, and that's how the safety works. Now, recently I had this at the range, and somebody, well, why do they need this big old loop here? Why would they do that? Well, if you think about it for a minute, it makes sense. Switzerland, about 3/4 of the country are the Alps mountains. If they were going to fight, they're going to be fighting up in the mountains and in the passes of those mountains. They get very cold up there. They're going to be wearing gloves and big coats and warm weather or cold weather gear up there. So when you want to put it on safe and you got these big old cold weather gloves on, you need something nice and big to hold on to. So it makes sense for the Swiss to put this big loop on here, this big handle for their safety and fire. Now, taking the bolt apart is actually a pretty simple process here. So I showed you how the safety works. So the sear either goes into the bottom when it's in vertical, or this is the safe over here on the side. If we want to take it apart, let me pull the camera over here a bit closer so you can see. We have the firing and the safe. So if we're going to take it apart, we have our firing pin and the firing pin spring in here that's holding tension on our operating rod here on the side. So the first thing we have to do is relieve that tension by taking it and putting it between the two. So we now have our sear not in the safe, not in the fire, but sitting between the two. And that releases the tension. And what we can do then is rotate that bolt sleeve and our operating rod comes out. So the operating rod sits in here and it sits, and this end sits here. And when we release the tension by putting it between, we can just simply rotate and pull that operating rod out. And once we have done that, we can simply unscrew from the bolt body. And now we can separate the bolt body from that sleeve. Now we have this part. So here is our firing pin spring, which is still under tension here, although that relieved the tension on the bolt So in order to continue with our disassembly, we need to take and relieve this tension. We do that by putting this back into the firing position, and it will go all the way forward into that. That relieves that tension. We can just pull down on the spring. Our firing pin comes off. Firing pin spring comes off. And now we have the sear and this. So that's how you disassemble the bolt. Now, to put it back together, very simply, is a reverse process. We have here, this is the safety, and this is firing. So we're going to put it in the firing with the sear all the way through on the firing, put it on something solid and hard, put our firing pin spring on. We're going to pull it down so that we have the top of our striker here, and then we take our firing pin and release the tension, and it goes back on. Now we have that there. Now, in order to put it back in the bolt, we have to put this under tension so the bolt sleeve will not be under tension when we put it on. So we need to take and pull it out and put it back in that middle position again. Now we have this ready to reinstall. So we're going to take our bolt sleeve and put it back on our bolt. Now this is very important that we pay attention. Remember, this is the model 1889. The bolt lugs go at the bottom. So if we try to put it up like this, it will go on, but it's not going to work. So we have to install our bolt sleeve with the bolt lugs here at the bottom for the 1889 model. And then we simply insert our firing pin and screw it back on. Now, here is the important part. So, get a pokey here so we can see we have our little slots down here, which is where this part of the firing of the operating rod goes, and then we have the nub on the top, and that has to go in here. So we have to have this just in that position where the top of our bolt sleeve, where the cam cutout portion here is right directly above our rails on the bottom. So they have to match. And then what we're going to do is we put this into the rails on the bottom. Our nub is going to go into that hole deep into the bolt right there. You can see the bolt firing pin right there. And then we're going to rotate it down so that this of the rails is all the way at the bottom, and then we're going to put the tension back on. And that's how we do it. So we put here, I turn it this way, here, and we'll put our nub inside, and it has to go in. Now we will rotate as we bring it down. It'll rotate that bolt sleeve. Now it's very important that you hold it tight while you put the tension back on, and that will hold the operating rod in. And that is both disassembly and reassembly of the model 1889 Schmidt Rubin. Okay, so that's the bolt. All right, hang out. One more segment. I'm going to bring the rifle back and show you how this goes back into the rifle, and we will do our conclusion to this video. I'll be right back. Okay, everybody. This is going to be the last segment of the video, and we're going to take this massive 9.3-inch bolt and put it back into the rifle. Now, one of the things about the Swiss is I do have a follower in this magazine, which is a last round stop, meaning that if the soldier was firing once all the rounds in the magazine are expended, it will not let the bolt close, because in the heat of battle, you want to let the soldier know that, hey, you've gone through all your ammo, it's time to reload. So if there's no ammo left, the fowler has a little nub on the top that won't let the bolt close. So in order to put this bolt back in right now, we're going to take the magazine cutoff and we're going to engage it, which will lower that down. And now we don't have to worry about that. So we can just go ahead and put it back in. So we have the receiver, and this is for the operating rod. And then we have our bolt release right here. So putting it back in is just a matter of putting it back into, getting your operating rod over here in its channel, holding that down, and it will go right back in. And that's how you put it back in. And when it does, it's in the firing position, and you can put it in safe or whatever you wish to do. So one of the things that I have really enjoyed about the Swiss Schmidt Rubin rifles, I found this is a great book, the Swiss Magazine Loading Rifles from 1869 to 1958. And this covers both Vetterli rifles and all in the Schmidt Rubin line. So that is a great book. Make sure you get the red one. There's a 2003 earlier edition, which does not have as much information. This is the second edition, and it's got a red cover on it. And this one came out in 2011. It is the second edition revised. Make sure you get that one if you want further information on Vetterli's and Schmidt Rubin rifles. So that is it for this video, everyone. This is the Schmidt Rubin, the first straight pull rifle of the Schmidt Rubin series. Now, this came out in 1889. They would upgrade this in 1896 and then upgrade that one again in 1911. And that rifle would be called the 1896/11. And that's the next rifle in our Schmidt Rubin series. So our next video will cover the rifle that comes after this one, that 1896/11. And that will be video number 3 of our Swiss rifle series. So be on the lookout for that. So hey, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button, leave a comment or a question if you have one. And hey, why not subscribe to the channel? In the meantime, that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me and learning about the model 1889 Schmidt Rubin Swiss rifle. Hey, I hope you have a great rest of your day or rest of your week, whatever the case may be. And we'll see you next Sunday with our next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.